this down. It's not for me. Do we have a flag in here? An American flag? I guess not. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. It's a little bit quieter than usual, but I'm thrilled that you're here and hope that you find this to be an informative meeting. I wonder if we can stand and have the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't see an American flag, so maybe we can pretend like there's an American flag in that corner and do it that way. Or we could all look at this microphone that looks like an American flag. How about that?
Yeah.
Okay, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. So it's been a busy summer. I hope you guys had a nice Halloween and that you're ready for Thanksgiving. I'm not quite ready for Thanksgiving, but I'm having my whole family over for dinner, so I will be ready by the time that day comes. Luckily in my family it's a potluck, so all my brothers and sisters bring something and it makes it a lot easier. Tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about homeless update. I wanted to share a little bit about some of the propositions that passed that will have a positive impact on the county, and give you a kind of a report back on a senior event that we had in Citrus Heights in the last couple weeks, and then I'm going to open it up for questions and answers. So it's not a real long agenda tonight, but we'll just kind of move our way through it and see where it takes us. The first thing I wanted to share is just a little bit of an update on homelessness as it relates to the county. Remember, I know Citrus Heights is a city, incorporated city, and in the overall county. Good morning, good evening, come on in. I'm confused. Come on in, you guys. Thanks for coming. In early 2018, periodically I send out a newsletter, and if for those of you who are here for the first time, if you're not receiving my monthly newsletter, it's fairly short. It is my way of reporting back to you and letting you know how I'm representing you in the county. I try to make it an easy read, so you'll want to open it again and read it again. So if you're already receiving it, don't put your name down because you're already on our list. And if you are not receiving and would like to, fill that out and make sure you write legibly, and we'll make sure you get our next newsletter. And so the first thing I wanted to talk about this evening is homelessness. And in early 2018, some of the surveys that we were sending out was kind of getting an idea of what do you think are the top issues to you? What is the top concerns that you might have or whatever? And overwhelmingly in my District 4, pretty much throughout my district, in early 2018, it was probably public safety or crime and roads first, and then homelessness. And then in a recent survey that we did, homelessness has kind of risen on that area of concern for people. It seems to be more at the forefront of people's minds. And I think probably countywide homelessness is growing. Although we haven't had a recent count, we do know that we have a growing problem, and the county is working really hard. In our budget cycle, we talked a little bit about this in the last meeting. The county went ahead and approved to continue the initiatives that we had put forth in the last year and keep those going, and we added some new ideas on how we could expand those initiatives and improve our homeless services. One of the things that is working really well at the county is called the scattered shelters model. And the reason what that is when we approved our homeless initiatives in 2017, one of the initiatives called for us to to establish a 75-bed facility for mental health and homelessness, a transitional facility. And it was really hard because we couldn't identify a site for that. Every time we thought we found a great site, it was either close to probation or close to a high school or close to something that wasn't appropriate, or they didn't want it in their backyard. And so the staff came back and came to the county and said, would you approve for us to get 15 houses where we could put 5 people in each house? What made that really great was that we could grow that model fairly quickly because you didn't need special licensing if you had 5 people or less. And you could also shrink that if you were able to really get a handle on this homeless issues and reduce the problem. That's a model that could also be shrunk back down fairly quickly. You wouldn't end up with a whole bunch of big county buildings that you're still paying on. The scattered shelter model is working really great for us. We have some situations along the river where communities, people who kind of hang together down by the river that wouldn't come, we couldn't coax them out of homelessness before, but now we can say, what if you all came together and you're in one house and you can come out together? And we're having some success with those kind of groups that they're kind of bonded, even if they're not family. They're bonded. They've been kind of watching out for each other. We've had a few groups like that and a few families that were able to come in to that scattered shelter model. You might have heard about the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, and this is something that happened a while back, and after my last meeting across the hall, someone said, well, I thought you were going to talk about that, and I felt bad because I totally forgot to talk about that. But it was the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals case, Martin versus the City of Boise, and basically what happened is the higher court ruled that we cannot criminalize conditions of being human. And that means we cannot criminalize someone for sleeping or sitting down or for seeking shelter in a public place, as long as if they're not committing a crime or disturbing or destroying something, we cannot criminalize that unless, and we can't ask them to leave unless we have offered them a shelter. And so the county is right now working on it hasn't really changed things a whole lot for the county because a lot of the people that are, well, I guess in some ways from the feedback I'm getting, like the police chief in Folsom told me that he's noticed maybe people are more willing to be out and more visible. People are more willing to be out and more visible, so you see them more. They're not as afraid of being arrested, so they're not hiding in the shadows maybe as much. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to maximize our ability to offer them shelter. And so one of the things that we're kind of excited about is Prop 2 that just passed, and that's the No Place Like Home initiative. And what Prop 2 is going to do is that's going to allow us to take some of the Mental Health Services Act money. That was Prop 63, that was the rich man's tax, and basically people that make over $1 million are taxed, and that money goes to help mental health services. And what Prop 2 is going to do is it's going to help allow us to take some of the bond money from the Mental Health Services Act and pull down those bonds in order to create affordable housing opportunities for mental health, people that are transitioning either out of homelessness or from anywhere who need a place to stay. It's going to create affordable housing for mentally challenged folks. The really good thing about Prop 2 is that it's not any new debt. It wasn't like making new bonds, pulling down more debt for the taxpayers to have to pay back. We can use Mental Health Services Act funds to pay back that bond debt over time. And it allows developers who are affordable housing developers. I don't know if you remember, but in the last many years, they took away redevelopment funds. And when they took away those redevelopment funds, what happened was all the affordable housing developers basically just went home because they couldn't figure out how to pencil out projects. They couldn't make those projects work unless they were subsidized in some way. And so this allows them to take 30 or 45% of a project and finance it with the bond money and use Mental Health Services Act funds to pay that bond money back. The challenge that we'll run into at the county is that we must carefully and responsibly decide how many of those we're going to do, because we have to make a commitment as the county to put someone in those projects for 20 years of services on site in that project for those folks. The good thing about this whole scenario is that it brings a housing resource for people who can transition and can be independent if they get the right support and the right medications. They can be independent, and what they're finding with these types of scenarios is they're now in a community. They have their little apartment, but they're in a community, a regular community. And over time, the community seems to wrap around and help them along. You know how that works, where one person in the community may, need a little help, and everyone kind of helps them along. And that's what seems to happen over time in these communities, where they over time use less and less of that support system that's on site there. And so this is Prop 2 is one of the propositions. When I did my surveys in my district, most of my district is probably the most conservative in Sacramento County, and most of my district, I think maybe it was because they perceived that it was new debt, but most people were not for the Prop 2. But I think it's going to be good for the county. I wanted to also share with you, well, before I go into some of the other propositions, I also wanted to share that there's a couple new HARTS, homeless assistance resource teams, that are emerging. In North Sacramento, the other night I was in Del Paso Heights. They're starting a North Sacramento HART, which is going to be servicing Rio Linda and North Highlands and Antelope. In fact, there were people there from Rio Linda with us. It was really great and exciting to see. And they're also going to start one in Arden Arcade. So there are more of the winter shelter. The HARTS, what they do, they do several things. They provide resources for homeless people. Their work is around trying to develop some support systems that will transition people out of homelessness. And like in Citrus Heights, your city is extremely supportive of the HART. They have a navigator that's embedded into their police department that works and connects those people to housing and resources like income, and trying to figure out what can we do to get them in a situation that they can sustain themselves over, on an ongoing basis. So I'm excited about that, and your HART in Citrus Heights is really doing a lot to support those new groups that are emerging and helping out. I also I also wanted to share a little bit about a couple of the other propositions. Prop 1 authorizes a bond to fund specified veteran housing assistance programs. That is $1 billion in home loans for vets and $1.5 billion for construction and rehab of rental housing for vets. So that will be, that passed, and that will be good for our veteran community. Do we have any veterans here tonight? I know a few, quite a few. Oh, well, congratulations, because President Trump, I don't know why, I must be tired tonight. President Trump announced that November is Veterans Month. For the very first time, the veterans don't have a day, they have a month. November is proclaimed that November 2018 as Veterans Month. So thank you for your service, and it's still your day, every day until the end of November. Let's see, Prop 4 is authorizing bonds funding construction at hospitals, providing children's health care. And that's going to be really exciting. UC Davis is anticipated to get $54 million from that. Prop 6 was the road transportation repeal. Now that was another one of those propositions that my district, not unanimously, but like 83% of my district was for the repeal. I don't think it was, I supported the repeal primarily because my people supported the repeal. But at the end of the day, it did not get repealed, and so there's going to be more money for funding roads. The challenge we will have is that the gas tax doesn't cover it. It doesn't even cover half of it, and we still need more funding for roads. There's not enough money for roads. And I remember in 2016 when I was running for county supervisor, and I personally went and I met with the finance director at the county, and I met with the Department of Transportation, and I was trying to understand, you know, what's the picture at the county, what it looks like, so that I could, you know, be smart on what the issues are. And at that time, there was $450 million in deferred maintenance on roads in the county. The other, yesterday or the day before, I was talking to our Department of Transportation, and they said it's up to $700 million in deferred maintenance. And I think the reason for that is because as roads deteriorate, the more they deteriorate, the more exponentially more it costs to fix them, because you have to really kind of scrape them down to the dirt. You can't just, on a fairly new road, you can do an overlay and that protects it so water doesn't get in and come up and cause problems. But the worse they get, the more expensive it is to fix them, and that's what's happening. So right now, I serve on the SACOG board, and we actually had a workshop today where we were talking about, we've been having workshops over time to try to figure out how are we going to pay for, what are we going to do about the roads, because the legislature doesn't seem to prioritize roads, which is, I find that frustrating. I wish the legislature would pause the train to Bakersfield and just focus on the roads right now, but they haven't been able to do that, and I don't know if they will. And so we're looking at, as transportation changes, and people are buying electric cars now, so people are buying less gas as time goes on. Gas consumption is going down, so that money is shrinking, and it's not going to pay for the roads. We're looking at different ways to do that. Would it be like a registration fee? Would it be toll roads? That's something they're doing down in Southern California. We had someone who came in today who flew in from Virginia who gave a really great PowerPoint and shared with us what they're doing in Virginia, which is they're doing toll roads where you don't stop and pay the toll. They just have an automatic thing that takes a picture of your license and you receive the bill in the mail for $4 or $6 because you went on that road. So there's no slowing down. You drive right through it and it still bills you and collects you, and you don't get billed unless you drive on that road, and you don't have to drive on that road. You can drive where all the traffic is, or you can take the toll road where you can get there faster. So you decide if you're willing to pay for that convenience. And so I thought that was intriguing. We're still looking at a lot of different options on how we can do this, and at the same time, while we're looking at all those different options, transportation as we knew it is changing. And we're going to electric cars, we're going to autonomous vehicles, and we're going to delivering things with droids through the air. So there's air passages, and they're actually doing pilots in Texas right now where they're actually doing. How many people are old enough to watch the Jetsons?
Yeah.
That's what they're doing in Texas right now, is pilot where a vehicle lifts you and takes you and drops you somewhere. So that could, in theory, create other traffic jams somewhere up in the sky. I don't know how they're going to manage that, but okay. We're not sure where it's going, and that's the hard part, because how do you plan how you're going to fund something, and nothing in government happens fast, so what do you do when you don't know what direction it's all going, and you can't be sure? So we're doing the best we can to look at all of our options in Sacramento County and work on that.
Can you see our police force in the sky?
They're already up there with the helicopters. So the other one is Prop 10, rent control. It did not pass, which I was very happy to hear that rent control didn't pass. I did not support it. The primary reason I didn't support it was because I've never read one economist who said rent control works. At the end of the day, it ends up reducing the amount of affordable housing to the people. The people that get in right away are really lucky, but it kind of discourages for investors to want to come in and invest if there's a cap on what they can make and no cap on the cost associated with the maintenance and care of a property. And so other than that, did anyone here go to the 65 plus event that we had in Citrus Heights? A couple people did, yeah. A couple weeks ago we had an event. It was called 65 Plus Ways to Save, a money saving workshop for seniors. And I brought the workshop that we had was really, I thought it turned out pretty good. Did you guys like it? There were about 24 vendors there. The only vendors that we invited were people that either bring revenues, savings, or resources that augment the seniors' monthly budget. There were people there like McGeorge School of Law. Did you know that they will update your trust for free if you're 60 years or older? That's like a $1,500 savings right there. The food banks. Did you know you can go to the food bank? You can go to food banks all over Sacramento as many times as you need to. They don't mind if you come every week. If you're struggling with your budget, the food banks give you a bag of groceries, and Meals on Wheels was there. They'll deliver meals, or they'll deliver 5 frozen meals once a week, and they even include pet food now. And there were just all kinds of little ways to augment your budget and make it easier for seniors to get by. And the event also had some volunteer actors in the community that were They were hilarious, especially if you knew the people that were actually acting. I said to one of them, I said to Charlie, "You are a really good actress because that is not you." And she was acting out, "Oh, I don't know what to do." That is not Charlie, if you know her. But we made a list of all the resources for those who weren't able to come. And we also took some video testimonials, and we're hoping to do a video that we're going to have online. I don't know when that's going to... Matt, is that going to go online soon, or...?
Probably next week.
Next week. We're going to have kind of a little commercial to kind of give you a feel for what that looked like. But this gives you all the resources in case you know someone. If you know a senior who might need help, or if you can use a little boost, like my sister at the Sylvan Library, they have, what do you call that? Ancestry.com. You can get that for free at Sylvan Library. My sister pays for that subscription, so that was like $40 a month, you know. They have the Sacramento Bee there, you know. So there's different resources in here. Come grab one if you want. And there's also some other handouts up here if you're interested. And that was, you know, that was all that I had. I had kind of a short update tonight, so if anyone has any questions, I'll try to answer them. David.
You never ask me a question.
I knew
You know better.
I knew you were going to be the first one.
Well, I'll wait.
No, go ahead.
I don't have to be first. You sent out a request that we respond to the issue of gun control. I responded, and since 3 weeks ago, what happened in Pittsburgh, we now have members of our congregation bringing weapons to Sabbath services. What did you find, and what is your plan to reduce the issue, to solve or address that issue?
Which issue? Guns or people with guns?
Either way you want to handle it.
So first let me explain to everyone what I do a lot of from my office. One of the things that I promised everyone when I got elected was that I will report back. I'll never forget who I work for. And so in order to never forget who I work for, I need to find a way to communicate with you. And if I rely just on a community meeting once a month, that really it's not as much as I want. I want to find a way to get feedback from my constituents. So I do a newsletter. They can give me feedback from there. I send out letters periodically that ask some of the hard questions. How do you feel about this? I send out email blasts, surveys, and in those surveys, that kind of gives me an idea of the temperature of how my district feels about issues. And I guess one of the letters that was sent out recently was a letter asking about the gun control issue, apparently. And so, and that was so that I could get a feeling of how does my district feel. In general, I support our Second Amendment rights. And that is part of our constitutional, part of our Constitution, and I took an oath to support the laws of the land, and I believe that our Second Amendment rights are important. But David sent you. I did get your letter, David, and I read your letter. I appreciate your input. You're asking me what I'm going to do. I haven't really had a chance to look at, you know, your thoughts and see how those thoughts would apply as to public safety. You know, I haven't had a chance to do my research around that, but in general, I can tell you I support our Second Amendment rights, and I don't see myself changing. So I don't see myself changing in that regard. I hope that answered your question. I know you want an answer, but I don't have an answer because I don't know enough around that whole issue that you brought up to tell you what I feel I could do. Yes.
What did the results of your feedback, though? I mean, I strongly disagree with you, but what did the results of your feedback and your survey find as far as this community? Did you have enough
Well,
input
we're
for
still
it?
we're still getting letters. We're still getting letters and emails. I don't know if Matt can comment on that.
Yeah, we
He
typically
gets-
wait several months. So the letters are, you're restricted by how many letters you can send out to people. Very limited, 200 letters in a month. So we wait for several months to really look at the responses that people are coming in. On this particular issue, I think we started it 2 months ago, and I think we've probably received maybe 10 or so letters on it. So waiting for more responses and getting a feel for what the community feels on things. You'll typically see right away, you'll get a few right away that say something, and it's very easy to be like, that's how the community feels. And wait a few months, because it typically starts to even out, and you end up finding that the community feels very, very gray about an issue and not very black and white.
I had a question for Matt. Did you post that poll in Facebook,
What are you referring to?
about the gun control?
No.
I never got a letter.
No, okay,
It was
so
on-
it's,
it was on the internet.
yeah, in the internet.
Yes, you sent out, the way I got it was via your internet posting. That's the way I received it.
What was the
We didn't send one out on gun control.
Well, there was no, I received the request, one of your things said, please send your comment in, and I got it via the internet, I didn't get it by USPS.
Maybe somebody forwarded it to you or something.
That could be, yeah.
But, so we send out via physical mail, 200 letters a month is our limit.
Is that a random?
It has to, by law, it has to be random. And so that's the issue, is if you haven't seen it, we can, by law, we can focus in communities. Right now, we're sending some letters out to Citrus Heights, just to see what your thoughts are on different things. Typically, county related or state related, and then we'll move on to another community.
Yes.
I'm wondering if there's any plans for the Auburn Boulevard corridor, like between Madison and Greenback, as far as, not the street itself, but the area and kind of a rundown, compared to the other areas, the other end of Auburn and stuff. Is there any plans for doing anything about that?
Mary Poole is here. She might be able to
In Citrus
help
Heights?
us with
Well, that's
that.
not, it's in county.
The county.
It's
Oh.
between the car dealership and Madison. That's what he's
Oh.
the county area.
That's a good question. We just approved some funding for several areas of the county, and I can't remember if Auburn Boulevard was one of them. So if you get Matt's card, he can get back with you and let you know if there's a timeline on that and if that's prioritized, how that's prioritized. A lot of times what I've noticed with these funding opportunities for roads, if the road is ready to go and they've got all the plans and everything's ready to go, sometimes they're better positioned for funding. I'm sorry, I just don't exactly know about that location. So Matt, can you? Yeah. Yes.
I was just curious about the letters, how people are picked to get a letter.
Matt, how are people picked to get the letter?
Entirely randomized by somebody above me.
What's the pool? Random what? Everybody that lives
In a certain zip code, in a certain
or are they
community?
voters?
I
Or
believe it's information from the assessor's office, so it goes to homes. Is how it works, and it's a random set of homes in a certain community.
So once that letter goes out, can anybody get it, or?
If you send me an email, I can send you all the versions of the letters. I'd be happy to.
Okay, thank you.
Then we'll get even more feedback. Yes, and then you, Matt.
Could you update us on, and the only name I can remember out of this whole mess is Sheriff Jones, but it has to do with the independent,
Inspector General.
yes, and I sent you a letter, because I had, and you responded, thank you very much, very promptly, because of I think it was an op-ed or something in the deed, but somebody who accused, the reporter had accused you of totally siding with Jones, and it wasn't the case by your response. You said the only thing you really sided with Jones about was lack of clarity in the contract for the IG. can you advise us what progress is happening with that clarification to get that IG back inside of the sheriff's enclave? Because, you know, I don't believe someone with that level of power should be, well, let's say unsupervised.
Okay, so first thing I want to do is I want to explain the sheriff position. The sheriff is not like a police chief in a city. A police chief in a city is appointed by the local government, and he works at the behest of the local government. And so they have authority over him. The sheriff is elected by the people, and so the only ones that, so he answers to the people. He's like me. I answer to you. If I don't work, if you don't like what I'm doing, you won't vote for me again, and you'll vote me out, and someone else will come in and do the job for you. So the Inspector General, what happened in that situation, for those who are not up on the issue, is that the sheriff and the Inspector General had a disagreement on the Inspector General released a report, and the sheriff had questions about whether or not that report, whether or not the Inspector General was still an independent review. The Inspector General, when that position was originally decided upon, and keep in mind, I think there's about 58 counties in California. Only 3 counties in California have anything like an Inspector General or a review, and two of those 3 are not the same as what our Inspector General is. So oversight over a sheriff isn't necessarily the norm in California, but our sheriff in Sacramento County wanted an Inspector General. He wanted an Inspector General because, and this is what he told me, he felt that it would be nice to have an independent eye on the situation, on situational analysis of things that happen, so that we can improve our police force, our sheriff deputy force. And so maybe they'll see something that we didn't see, and it's a way that we can improve our processes and our procedures. The situation, when the sheriff felt that for some reason, because of this report that was issued on a certain officer-involved shooting where someone died, he felt that he wasn't convinced, he had question as to whether or not that person was still independent. And in order to protect his department, he felt he needed to close those doors. He needed to, draw a line and say, no, I want an Inspector General, but I want someone who's independent. So when the sheriff did that, hit the fan. Mm-hmm. And it really kind of was hard, because the Board of Supervisors, we vote on the contract, but we don't have jurisdiction over the sheriff. We don't control who he lets into his department. He answers to the people. And so when he closed those doors, now we have an Inspector General who we're paying $120,000 a year to do a job they can't really do because they don't have access. So we have to figure out what we're doing now is we're working with the sheriff. The sheriff has indicated that he still wants an Inspector General, but he thinks we got a little off track as to what is expected, and I did agree that there was a lack of clarity in the contract relating to what was expected of the Inspector General. I want to say that there's only one entity that determines whether or not those shootings are lawful or not, and that's the DA. The Inspector General's job is not to place judgment on whether or not a shooting was legal. His job is to look at the situation and make recommendations like, can we provide more education, or do we need better technology, or do we need to work harder in this area to have more training on this or that. That's what his eyes are there for, is to help us see how we can be better and what we can do to have the best department and keep our deputies safe and keep our neighborhoods safe. In the situation at hand, we're going to be having a meeting. So the news article in the Bee basically said one said I sided with the sheriff, and then the next one said I slapped him down, and I can't remember what it said. It was not, the Bee did not report accurately what I did. I know, huh? And so what I think, when I voted, the last vote I did was to agree. It was clear that there weren't going to be enough votes to approve the contract, which the contract that the sheriff and the county had met and we thought we could do, I would have voted for that. But it was clear it wasn't going to pass. So rather than vote no and be, on the, I just said, okay, you need a little more time. Let's take a little more time and figure out how we can put our heads together to get a contract that everyone in the council and the sheriff can be happy with. And that's kind of what we did, and we're coming back on December 4th to have that conversation around that contract, and the hope is that we can get a temporary contract. My hope is we can get a temporary contract and bring Rick Brazil back, and then we can, through the next year, be working on how we're going to work through this. We've got a problem. We're trying to work through it, but we can't control it as the board. We don't. The sheriff does not work for us. He doesn't. He works for the people. So that's what we're going to come back and have that conversation. I have met with Rick Brazil. Rick Brazil seems very professional. He indicated to me that he didn't think he even wanted to come back. So I'm not sure, everyone's worried about him coming back, but I'm not even sure if he wants to. And the sheriff has indicated he would be willing to have Rick back if we had a good understanding, and he could be assured that his functions were going to be independent in nature and not political in nature. So I think we're making progress. It's my hope on December 4th that we're going to be able to, if we can agree on that contract, then we will have what we all want, which we all want, an inspector general. I think we're better to have an independent review, and I don't think it's a bad thing to have a liaison to the community, and also to have someone who's looking in with different eyes to say, well, this is what I see. Just in case there's something better we can do. It's always good to have that. Yes?
I've tried to follow this issue, and I sort of jumped around a bunch of different articles, getting dabs and digs here. But, clearly, where did he go, where does the lack of independence occur in the McIntyre report? Is that the right report?
The
Inspector General's report of the McIntyre shooting?
Hi, David. Thanks for coming.
Where did he show his lack of independence? Where did he go wrong in that report? He's been writing many reports these years for Sheriff Jones.
I think one of the questions that the sheriff expressed was the timing of the report. In every other shooting, officer-involved shooting where there was a death involved, the report was never released before the DA's investigation was complete. I went through every single one of those reports. I read every single one of them paragraph by paragraph and compared every single one of them paragraph by paragraph slowly all the way down. And there were some differences in that report. I don't know if I can remember them all offhand, but one of them was the timing. In every report, he started the report out with, the DA has determined that this was a lawful shoot, or not, or whatever. He hasn't done that many reports. There were maybe 9 reports. He doesn't just do officer-involved shootings. He does officer-involved shootings where no one was hurt. In those scenarios, he might have released it early because there was no DA investigation.
Was he given guidelines about not releasing it before the DA saw it?
No, I think that was part of the problem. There was a little bit of a lack of clarity, and when he came and asked, there was question regarding, can I release this? We said, you're independent. We can't tell you. I mean, we can't tell you when to release it. You're an independent. You're independent. It's your decision. If you think your report is ready, it's your decision. But he made that decision, and when he did, there were some differences in the protocol of the past and how he did it this time, and because of that, it created, it got to the B overnight, magically, and because of that, it has created potential liability for the county because the DA has still not ruled on that case. So when the DA comes out with a ruling, and if they say that was a lawful shooting, but he had opinions on that that maybe led someone to believe that there was a differing opinion, we now might have a civil case on our hands, and he may be asked to testify against us. And that's not, that puts us all in a really bad position. So there needs to be, we need to protect our, these are taxpayer dollars, these, do you understand what I'm saying? It puts us in a little bit of a bad position.
You have a very difficult situation, and
it's very difficult.
I don't understand the severity of what I've read about Scott Jones's actions. I mean, if somebody makes a mistake, and you take them aside and say, listen, here, you've got a problem here. You don't, take them back to their knees.
I think the reaction of the sheriff was, he has a deputy that's being investigated. A deputy who's out there every day risking his life to keep our neighborhood safe. And his reaction was, close the doors. If this isn't how this was intended to be, we can't have an inspector general that is not completely independent, that might have a political agenda. I think in his mind, I don't know, we'll have to ask him. That's what I'm assuming, and if I was the mother of that deputy, I would want justice to play out the way justice is intended. Let the law do their work. And there is a fine nuance that a lot of citizens don't understand. The law is different than protocol and procedure. The Inspector General is investigating protocol and procedure, and the DA is the only one who can determine if that was a lawful shoot. So I think that was the challenge, and maybe he reacted different than it would have been nicer if it was a little softer, but I mean, he's like, make my day sheriff. He's not a shy, I mean, it's good to have a sheriff that knows what he wants, I guess. Bob.
Who does the Inspector General report to?
He reports, he is independent, he's an independent contractor. Yeah. He's paid by the county. He works with the sheriff, with the cooperation of the sheriff. He doesn't really, that's the problem. He's not elected, so he doesn't report to the people. He answers, I guess he works for the county as an independent contractor.
If the county supervisors let out the contract,
We did not let out the contract.
Who does?
The Inspector General. He's an independent contractor.
He lets out the contract to himself?
He decides when
No, what I mean is who hires him?
Yeah.
the county pays him with taxpayer dollars.
So the supervisors hire him?
Well,
What part
no,
of the county is hiring him? That's the question.
the sheriff has to agree. The sheriff does not have to have an Inspector General.
I understand that.
He can pull the plug and say, so we can't hire him without the sheriff. It takes both of us.
Okay.
And we can't control the sheriff,
I
what he
understand
does.
that. Okay, so it sounds like the problem is that this guy doesn't report to anybody. He does whatever he feels like doing.
I don't think that's the problem because he is an independent, and it's an independent eye, and the people like that, you know, and the sheriff likes that. I think the problem is there was maybe either a lack of clarity in the contract as to the protocol and the expectations of that contract, and maybe he thought he had more authority. Maybe he thought he had supervisory authority over the sheriff. He doesn't.
Yeah.
The only ones that have that is you.
Yeah, it seems to me that he can be independent and still report to either the DA or report to the sheriff. I mean, somebody should have
Well, the
jurisdiction over him.
here's how he here's how he informs. He informs the board. The board approves the sheriff's budget. So we control the money that goes to the sheriff. Thank you for coming, you guys. And the sheriff, he informs the sheriff as to, you know, what he sees to help the sheriff improve his department. So he's informing processes and procedures and investigatively with the sheriff. With us, we are informed by his reports. That kind of gives us an idea when the sheriff comes and says, I need video cameras, or I need this or that. We're the ones that approve, and if the Inspector General is saying there's situations happening, they need more training, we might be informed by that so that we can say, yeah, he does need more training, you know, that's what the Inspector General... So it informs all of us to help us be better.
If we don't want to have the Inspector General report to anybody, we should at least have the sheriff, the DA, or somebody who's involved in these cases countersign that, yes, I've reviewed this report and it looks accurate.
Well, you know...
My understanding from the B is that, or of the situation, I think the sheriff said it, that he released that report without telling anybody about it. And that's how the B got it. They got it before the sheriff saw it, before the DA saw it. And
no, I think that... I don't think that's the case.
No.
I think there were people that knew, the sheriff had seen the report that, you know, every single report that comes out from the Inspector General got criticism in it. So the sheriff is not opposed to that criticism. He gets that. I even asked him, because I studied every one of them, I said, well, what about this? You know, I asked a question, you know, what about the Inspector General recommends that you have a department that reviews your policy every 3 years. And he's recommended that in every single report, but it just keeps coming. Why is there something you did about that? Or he said, well, I don't always do what the Inspector General says because it's not always the right thing for my department. For instance, we don't have enough money to have a whole department. We don't have the funding. We're trying to get boots on the ground. So we're trying to do the homeless stuff. We have jails that we're trying to update. We're working with the mental health issues. There's a lot going on at the Sheriff Department. They don't have the money to hire a whole department just to look at policy and update it every 3 years. So what they do is whenever there's a change in a state policy, they just update it live time. So as the state updates it, they update it. And he said, Sue, that's more cost effective. We don't have a bunch of people on payroll. It's not waiting for 3 years. It's the minute the state updates the law, we do the research and we update it in our department live. So that's how the sheriff responds, you know. So he doesn't always take the exact advice. The inspector general may not have the wisdom that our sheriff has. He doesn't know the department like the sheriff does, and he doesn't know the budget the way the sheriff does. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Just for some clarification, because I think I heard the question asked in roundabout ways. Since there's a contract with the IG, who are the signatories to the contract, number one? And number two, are there conditions within the contract where under which either side can cancel the contract?
Yes.
Something that's simple, either
there's
one hand lack of performance or another hand for lack of payment, you know, whatever.
Yes, there's a notification. I think it's a 30-day notice. Either side can cancel the contract, and the supervisors.
We don't like the way you park your hair today. You're done.
We can give notice. Yes, yeah. It's an at-will. There's an at-will clause in that contract, and also the supervisors approve the contract and authorize this county executive to sign it. And in my opinion, the inspector general should work directly with the county executive. And the reason for that is when the inspector general works maybe with one supervisor, that we can't always be assured that we're all in the communication loop. And that's kind of what happened this time. There was one supervisor there was communication with, and the rest of us were out of the loop. So when something goes to the county executive because of the Brown Act, he makes sure we're all aware of the communications, so we're all apprised of the happenings and so forth. So that's what I would like to see, is for him to work with the county executive, but at the end of the day he has to also work with the sheriff, because the sheriff is the one that gives him access. And there are, from what I understand, there's issues around, you know, safety in our sheriff department. I've talked to some of the captains. They've said, Sue, I don't have access to everything in the sheriff department. I'm a captain, and I don't have access to all levels of the sheriff department. Why does someone need that kind of access? Why don't they just need access for what they're investigating, you know, which is a reasonable assumption. So, you know, I think the sheriff has the authority to do what he did. It may not be the way we liked it. You know, at the end of the day, he has the authority, and we do not. We are not oversight. He doesn't work for us.
Well, my point was that with those provisions in the contract, there's sort of a de facto supervision for the IG, so that if the signatories to it don't think that he's doing his job, then he can be removed. That's my only point, because people are saying, well, okay, he's totally independent. Well, he is kind of, but not. Because if you don't like the way he's performing, you give him 30 days notice, say you're all done.
Yeah, no one has ever had a problem with this inspector general.
That isn't my point.
But
my point is to respond to that. The fact that he could be removed if somebody, you know, if he didn't think he was doing the job. So there is, in effect, he does have a boss, which is a county supervisor.
Well, I think it's more, I think where we're, in the spirit of where we're coming from, we really want him to be independent. Sure. We all want him to be independent. We want him to make those decisions. We just want to make sure that he understands what he's there to do. And, you know, that there's an understanding around that. This was the very first time something came up where there was question as to whether or not this had gotten political, and whether or not, you know, he was completely independent. And if he's not independent, it's not good for the tax. It's not good for us, and it's it's not good for the sheriff, and it's not good for the county, because it's taxpayer dollars it's paying for him.
Doesn't this whole situation point out that there's some holes in the way the whole thing is organized, in that, yeah, if this guy could do this, the next guy might be political, and really blow up everything.
And I think that was why I said I agreed with the sheriff. Everyone said, oh, Sue is, you know, I do support the sheriff. I do think there was a lack of clarity. I think it was something that the Inspector General and the sheriff got caught up in the middle of, and they both maybe, I can only assume they had good intentions, but maybe there wasn't enough clarity in the contract, and that is the problem. And if we fix that, maybe we can just keep going, and Rick can stay on board, and we can, you know, just hope that it's better, you know? Yes.
I don't have a political bone in my body, hardly, or logical. So can you sort of explain to me what you mean by lack of independence with Rick Braziel?
I think what I'm saying is we want an independent eye on our department that can help us understand how we can be better without an agenda. You know, that without any agenda or way that they're going to benefit by this, you know, these reports.
How would he
a political
by what he did? I'm sort of looking for a specific of his transgression here.
I don't know. I mean, I think that's what we're looking for, is someone who doesn't have any, you know, they don't have maybe it's an unbiased, it's a honest look at something that is just trying to see everything they can see and help us see what they see.
Oh, I'm not looking for a general definition. I'm looking for a specific transgression on the part of Rick Braziel. I mean, is it the fact that what he teaches post, is that accurate? You know, de-escalation procedures, is that like a conflict of interest? I'm looking for what did you put about he questioned the independence of the internal of the Inspector General. What was it that made the question the independence? What action? We talked about the time.
I think one of them was that the report was released early. It was done in a different way than it had been done in the past. I think that was one of them. I don't know all the details around what the sheriff is thinking. What I do know is the sheriff had the authorization. He has the authority to close those doors if he thinks that this he expressed he was concerned about the security of his department, and he lawfully had the right to express that and do what he did. And so we don't control that. And so what I'm trying to do is figure out how can we make the sheriff happy so we can continue with an Inspector General.
Yeah, my brain likes the concrete. It's like, what the heck did he do wrong? You know, I like the specifics instead of the big, you know, I don't know how to put it, you know, just sort of this political speak or legal speak or whatever. It's like, what did he do wrong? And you know, I also looked online for some good. The sheriff very clearly presented his side, and it was hard to find that. And I would appreciate that. I looked on his website, I looked on all kinds of stuff. I mean, he's had.
I think you could go back to our board meeting. He was pretty clear in our board meeting. He came and spoke at our board meeting. You can go online to saccounty.net and see that board meeting where the sheriff was there, and he told exactly why. I can't remember all of his words, and our sheriff is also an attorney, so he understands the law very well, and so that might be a good resource.
As an aside, can you fill us in on the status of where the sheriff's department is in getting the body cameras?
Do you know where the sheriff is on body cameras? I know the sheriff wanted to get them, and we're working that direction, but I can't.
Yeah, the sheriff made the undersheriff last about 9 months ago made a public statement to the supervisors that they would like body cameras. They're investigating body cameras. There's a number of different vendors they're testing.
I read a report from a year ago that said that all the testing was done and it was in the lap of the sheriff to go forward.
My understanding is they were still doing testing as of several months ago, and there's a lot of considerations for how they roll it out. They don't have the funding to roll out.
I can tell you the board has to approve
The
the
board has to
funding.
approve it. So what they're doing is a very
And
slow
that's gonna be a
rollout and a
challenge.
test with a small amount of people to try to iron out kinks before they get enough funding to roll it out countywide. But their intention is to, at some point, roll out body cameras countywide.
So it's 7:05, so I'm going to formally end the meeting. I want to thank all of you for coming, for all your questions, and I hope you come back. And so,
You were wondering how...
have a nice Thanksgiving. I know, I didn't think we would. I thought this meeting would, I didn't have that much to say, so that was good. That was good. We had a good, and thank you for being so civil. Not all my neighborhoods are like that.
Great to meet you.
65?
Yeah, I was in so 3 years in a row I was with Maurice Forum. She was in there the whole time, and she was very repetitive. And so I came in as a freshman too. What's she doing now? I know you mentioned it, right? Yeah.
Stay in touch. See you later. Well, and that's the thing, I mean, we want them to be independent, but there's got to be certain parameters that you can't Thanks for coming.
Yeah, please do. Absolutely.